Chapter 10. Falma de' Medicis was the second-born son of Archduke Bruno. Unlike Palul, who was the eldest son and the heir to the de' Medicis family, Falma would become the household royal court apothecary in the future. So his father, Bruno, raised him in a very strict manner since childhood. It was so that Falma could withstand the heavy responsibilities of a full-fledged royal court apothecary with sense of fulfillment. He was allowed to handle dangerous medical herbs, and be in situations where he could get burned. Falma would get so exhausted from his training in divine arts that lasted from morning to evening, he ended up crying because he wanted to play. It reached the point where he was already afraid to look straight into his father's eye. It was not a whip of love anymore. Bruno inadvertently became very strict to his own son. Therefore, his father stopped guiding Falma directly and left the training for pharmacology and divine arts to Eleanor Bonnefoy, Bruno's most reliable and excellent disciple. Eleanor seemed to have trained him well. For the past several years, Bruno wasn't able to directly keep an eye to Falma's growth. An apothecary tended to be close to the lives of their patient, since it was most necessary for an apothecary to have an empathizing heart and skills. It was the sincere face-to-face interaction with the patient that granted belief. Bruno neglected to make any effort to understand his son's heart, even in regards to his son's thoughts or dreams. Bruno didn't know Falma very well, though he still realized that the boy in front of him wasn't the Falma he knew. Bruno couldn't remember when the change happened. He was deeply ashamed of it. Bruno took out a notebook from Falma's bag, which was beside him. He flipped through the pages. Falma was separated by a wall of ice, so he couldn't stop his father from checking his notebook. Bruno went pale. Falma wrote down his notes in Japanese so nobody could read it. He regretted his blunder that his notes in the process of examining stain samples were unexpectedly snatched away. Though, it didn't change anything as his father couldn't read Japanese. He also began to take all kinds of records of this world, like the medical records of the servants he examined and the medication records. He also graphed a lot of examination data. Mathematical and chemical structural formulas would look like a cipher that resembles some kind of magic in his father's eye. I will say it again. Who are you? In this world, there was a legend of a changeling child that was swapped. There was something like an evil spirit that will stealthily swap children. The swapped child was considered to be a child of a monster and not of a human. He suspected that Falma was a changeling because of the strange characters that was written and the use of divine arts without a wand. There was also a legend that if a changeling was discovered by a human, it would disappear into thin air. He thought about risking his son's life, but it wasn't his son anymore that would disappear. This writing, what is it? This, and this, and this. Where did you learn this? I acquired this knowledge of medicine in a dream I saw. On the day I was struck by the lightning, as well as the written characters. Falma cooked up an explanation, and his father bought it. It wasn't necessarily a lie if he described his previous life as an event in a dream. If Falma didn't explain, it would be troublesome if he was asked where he learned it, or what book it was written in, as those could be searched. It was during the lightning strike, huh? Yes, it was. In the dim compounding room, Falma took off his coat in order to show the scars on both arms. His father clearly saw it through the transparent ice wall. The medicine god dwells in you. How did this happen? What kind of person was he? Falma doesn't even know if he was still human. Because Falma had become silent since then, it indirectly transmitted to his father, and he affirmed it. I see. Unlike the father who had been striving day and night on the way of medicine, the son was blessed by the medicine god. His father didn't have any choice but to follow the will of the guardian deity whom he couldn't stop to love and respect. Dear father, please use this potion for Her Majesty. This is special medicine. If it was said that Bruno compounded the potion and the treatment succeeded, his honor would be maintained. He would also keep his position as the royal court apothecary and would gain the favor of the empress. Even if Falma didn't meddle, it was better for his father to do so. You administer the medicine you made, Falma. His father shook his head a little bit to decline and solemnly told him, "That is the pride and responsibility of an apothecary. The patient believed you because you staked your life for the medicine that they receive." Falma thought that his father was a true apothecary. He truly realized how immature he had been. "I understand." Falma cancelled the ice wall with his right hand, held the potion, and went past his father out of the compounding room. He left a word to his father when passing by. "Please leave it to me, father. I'm going to save you and Her Majesty." This kind of tone was something his father had never heard from Falma before. It was not the words of an arrogant boy, but he heard it like it was the words of a god. Bruno bowed his head in silence, then fell down on his knees. How could he stop Falma anyway? Falma, with the potion in hand, peered before the Empress. The Empress was sitting up impatiently waiting for Falma to return. She held great expectations. She mustered her last drop of energy to return from the edge of death back to the land of the living. "You're late." Her Majesty had been waiting. "What happened to your father? Did he run away?" The chief court physician, Claude, tattled. Claude thought that because Bruno wasn't able to make a proper medicine, he didn't consider the boy capable of any better. This was not child's play. Claude was irritated that Bruno didn't come back immediately and euthanize the Empress. "I don't mind that it took time. Come closer." The Empress called Falma to come close. Since Falma was wearing a mask, he was spared from airborne infection. He approached without hesitation. "For your information, my father did not run away. My father and I compounded this medicine for Her Majesty. This is a new medicine, Your Majesty." Falma had honored the work my father had done as an apothecary until now. That was what I had conveyed to them. Unsteadily walking over, Bruno appeared at that moment. The group of physicians looked at him with contempt for his inability to remonstrate his son's intrusion, but Bruno no longer wanted to stop Falma. Besides, there was no way for him to stop Falma anyway. Whatever Falma did with his hands from now on, Bruno would engrave it into his memory. "Before I explain the efficacy of the new medicine, I want to show something to Your Majesty. Will you cooperate for a moment?" Falma held out a palm-sized metal tool respectfully before the Empress. "What is this?" The Empress picked it up while ruminating. It was a small metal instrument. Falma once again took a sample of the Empress' phlegm and stained it on the glass plate. He then set it on the metal plate of the instrument. "Please observe the bodily fluids that I took from Your Majesty with the instrument. Then, please look at the hole from a bright place. Like this." He opened the needle-sized hole on the instrument and urged the Empress to bring her eyes close to it and peep through. Falma asked the chamberlain to open the window for ventilation and bring a lamp. The lamp was then placed below the instrument to guarantee some light. The Empress was skeptical as she peeped. "What is that? Are you mocking Her Majesty?" The chief court physician, Claude, shook his voice in anger. "Wait, don't be so noisy." The chief court physician kept his mouth shut. The Empress' attention was already absorbed on the small instrument. And then, "I see something visible." Falma could magnify his view with the diagnosis eye, but it lacked details on the object. Science could prove the existence of tuberculosis bacteria. He had invited the Empress to the micro-world which no one from this world had seen yet. What Falma had presented was a simple microscope with the simplest structure that had a pinhole, a glass ball, and piece of metal. The single-lens microscope was the invention of Leeuwenhoek. It had sufficient performance even if it doesn't have a good lens. An electrical system was not necessary at all. There are no lens tubes. It was just a lens on a metal plate with a specimen holder. It was simple and very small at 5 centimeters. Don't underestimate the power of antiques. During Falma's previous life, he was able to identify disease-causing germs in countries without electricity. The microscope had about 200x resolution. You couldn't say that the magnification was sufficient, but it had minimum performance. The image that the simple mechanism showed unveiled the clear truth. "Your Majesty, do you know that rod-like thing that keeps wriggling?" Falma drew its shape in the air with his finger. It was the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Preventive measures are taken in Japan by vaccinating infants with BCG vaccine. That creature is the cause of the white fatal disease, tuberculosis. This organism is destroying your body, Your Majesty. It was at that moment that all the people in the room knew that organisms called bacteria existed in this world. Everyone, please look at the instrument after Her Majesty is done. The court physicians were fighting to look into the microscope. Until that time, the court physician thought that the smallest thing was what could only be seen by bringing it close to the eye. To their surprise, there was a world which couldn't be seen by the naked eye. It was a fact that they couldn't easily accept. Wow, what are these? Insects? Claude twitched his face when he saw something repulsive wriggling. If necessary, I will create a blueprint and will also teach you how to build it. Falma didn't have the intention to monopolize the microscope. With it, they would have a deeper understanding about the microorganism if they apply medical science. It should be noted that this is not a divine skill. Bruno's hands were trembling when he peeped into it. What in the... He was lost for words. Humans were now allowed to peek at the world that only gods could see. That was the impression Bruno had. His whole body was overwhelmed by an unknown excitement. Falma started to speak when everybody was observing the tuberculosis bacteria. He then prepared another slide glass with the tuberculosis bacteria sample that was stained, that he set aside earlier. The atmosphere had changed completely. I will now explain the treatment plan from here on out. Falma quickly took out the syrup and showed it to the Empress. As you have surmised, that organism is living inside the body of Her Majesty. The treatment is to completely kill it. In the presence of the Empress, the line of renowned court physicians frothed at their mouth from too much shock. Bruno dropped down to his knees. This potion contains 4 types of special medicine. Each part of the medicine will prevent the organism from propagating and some parts of the drug will kill that organism. If it's only one type, some of the organisms may be resistant to the medicine. Therefore, I used multiple medicines. When Falma immersed the organism into the medicine, they saw it perish. Falma explained it while inserting a joke that they might be able to hear its death throes. These 4 types of special medicine will intensively kill the disease in 2 months. And I will provide additional treatments afterwards by reducing the prescription to 2 types. Since Your Majesty's case is severe, it may require additional dosage. You have just overturned a concept of conventional medicine from its roots without explanation. The Empress was also very surprised. The court physicians didn't say anything, but they also were just as surprised as the Empress. They had gained knowledge beyond the conventional wisdom that they had. Will taking such strong medicine harm the body? There's little effect on the body, but there is concern for side effects. Mainly it would be a liver dysfunction. I will closely monitor the treatment for it. I will divide the compounded potion. I will first drink half of it, and you will drink the other half. Can I have Your Majesty's decision after you see it? Falma had to do this to dispel any doubt of assassination or the medicine being fake. Will you agree to it? Yes, by all means, let me drink it. The Empress showed a cheerful face towards Falma. Her mind was fully set at ease as all of her fears and anxieties were eliminated, even though she was still seriously ill. The Imperial Prince also stopped crying. The symptoms will improve soon. But it will take at least 6 months for full recovery. In 6 months, without the treatment, she would not be able to survive that long. In a situation where there was no cure, his father had nothing to say. Thus, they had no other recourse. So that means, it takes time, I understand. She had observed the tuberculosis bacteria. As the Empress realized that her whole body was infected by it, her understanding and curiosity had deepened. Carefully over time, it would kill the bacteria slowly. That is to say, it would not instantly kill all of it, but there wouldn't be any bacteria remaining. She was able to understand the explanation of Falma. Your Majesty, you will drink this every day in my presence. It was effective to administer the medicine right in the presence of the attending physician, so that there wouldn't be a situation where she forgot to take the medicine. Falma had to patiently continue to treat the tuberculosis of the patient. Just because her symptoms improved, it didn't mean that she could stop taking the medicine. Falma poured the potion from the flask into the 3 test tubes evenly. Then, Falma gulped down the first one to show it was not poison. "If you will, your majesty." "Yes." When the empress drank it until the last drop, her haggard face smiled. "That was delicious." The empress then gently fell asleep. Falma wrote down a medical record in Japanese for the new patient in his book. "Dear father, let's return back to the mansion. I'm hungry now and I want to eat something sweet today." His father felt anxious as Falma had said it in a childish way. "Also, this medicine is for you, dear father. That is, if you feel like receiving it." Falma handed over the last test tube of medicine to his father. His father, who was infected by tuberculosis, received it after hesitating for a long time. From now on, white fatal disease can be cured. It was no longer an incurable disease. They would now live together with this new method of medicine. The father grasped the hand of the son, who spoke with reliable words, with both of his hands. "Thank you, my son." Lot, Ellen and the servants were waiting at the gate of the de Medici's family residence for many hours after the sun went down. The dinner that was already prepared had cooled down, but no one had touched it. The father and son hadn't come back yet from the Empress Palace. Nobody knew the condition of the Empress aside from the royal court apothecary. Everyone could only guess at that time if an accident happened along the way. Ellen had considered one possibility. If they both failed in the treatment, they might have taken responsibility and killed themselves. In the occasion that the Empress died, the chief royal court apothecary, which acted as the lead physician, and the chief court physician would kill themselves together to take responsibility. Bruno was a proud royal court apothecary, so his sense of responsibility was very strong. It was a possible scenario. "My lord, Master Falma." Ellen removed her glasses while in tears as she assumed the worst-case scenario. Lot was grasping the vial of medicine that was given by Falma and made into an amulet. Just how much longer are they going to wait? Every minute felt like an eternity. Everyone was waiting for their return. Lot suddenly raised her face as she happened to hear the faint sound of a trumpet echoing over the mountain. After that they started to clearly hear the sounds of horses' hoofs. As the rhythm became louder, the knight's horses could now be seen from the mansion. Lot suppressed a lot of her emotions, as she felt her tears flow out. "My lord, Master Falma." Lot ran up to them at full speed. "Thank goodness, really. Geez, don't make us worry anymore." Ellen held on to her glasses firmly as she followed behind Lot. "We're home." Falma caught Lot as she jumped to him as soon as he got off from his horse. Welcome back. Thus, the upheaval of today's events had come to a close. Chapter 11. The careful treatment of Empress Elizabeth was moving favorably. Falma attended Ellen's lecture in the morning, then he would go to the palace together with his father after lunch to make sure the Empress was taking the potion. It had become a habit. It hadn't been long but they had seen signs of improvement in the Empress' condition. Falma had been wary of any side effects like liver damage. Falma was monitoring diligently by taking test data since he couldn't digitize a simple biochemical test. With the Empress' weak constitution, her usage of divine arts was affected, but no side effects were seen. She was also progressing well as the blood in her phlegm had subsided. By the 3rd month, the results of the tuberculosis in her body were almost non-existent. Falma advised all the courtiers who worked in the royal court to take the medicine as a preventive measure. This was because several court physicians, chamberlains, and the prince himself were infected, thus Falma made a schedule to start treating them. As for all of them, probably since they were nobles rather than commoners, no severe side effects were observed. Of course, he didn't neglect his father, who was his closest patient. Apprentice apothecary Falma's clinical record amassed an enormous amount of records. It reached the point where Falma had to add new records using this world's language instead of Japanese, so his father could read it. Every night after dinner, his father would shut himself in his room and would stay up late to read the clinical records that Falma acquired. Each morning after, his father would ask many questions about many details that Falma started wondering what his father was doing at that place. Also, his father grasped each of the courtier's living condition and medical history. This became Falma's secondary source of information as they came to realize each other through information sharing. Falma was a busy 10-year-old kid that was living his life to the fullest. Though he didn't force himself to overwork, as Falma was trying to be healthy above all else. It was the lesson he learned from his previous life. This was to work at your best moderately while not stressing yourself out. Falma's presence and his knowledge of pharmacology gained him favor from the Empress and started to be accepted by the royal court. The court physicians lamented on the limits of their existing medical treatments as Falma, the up-and-coming royal court apothecary, taught them how to make simple microscopes to observe and confront disease-causing germs and pathogens. They eagerly wanted to learn the unknown knowledge they thought Falma was monopolizing for himself. The information about the invention of the microscope was immediately known to all medical universities in the empire. One day, a certificate of commendation and commemorative plaque has been sent and addressed to Falma from the far-off Novgorod Medical University. The chief court physician, Claude, thought it was because of what he did that led to this turn of events. It was because Claude bought the microscope Falma personally made for a huge sum of money. He then sent a personal letter, detailing Falma as the inventor, along with a real microscope to the medical university. The medical science of Saint-Flouvre Empire was seen as below level compared to the world-leading Novgorod Medical University. It seemed that the royal court physicians were restoring their honor with this new invention, but Bruno already knew the situation behind it. Falma was impressed, or was rather amazed, at this world's great white tower. A delegation from the vice president of Novgorod Medical University had rushed to the Saint-Flouvre Imperial School of Pharmacology. They requested from Bruno, who was the president, to disclose the recipe of the special medicine that Falma, who was said to be an excellent royal court apothecary, had made and used to cure the Empress. Claude had omitted in the report that Falma was only a 10-year-old apprentice apothecary. Also based on Bruno's intuition, he did not let Falma meet with the delegation. It was obvious that Falma would be used as a tool in the political power struggle in the university. So the delegation from the vice president gave up and went back without meeting the rumored royal court apothecary. Ellen talked to Falma, who was looking at a group of carriage from afar. It seems that everyone wanted Master Falma's medicine. It's the special medicine for the fatal white disease, right? To Ellen, it was a miraculous medicine that was able to cure an incurable disease. I can only produce 4 medicines for the fatal white disease for now. It is as I suspected. It is still hard for you to use that divine skill. Ellen realized that it was probably the god of medicine that dwelled within Falma that made it possible to use the divine skill. That's why Falma hadn't yet shown his compounding and synthesis process to anyone. Ellen wanted to ask him to teach her, but it might not be possible to do so. Thus, Ellen thought it couldn't be helped. If there were lives to be saved by Falma's divine skill, he had to continue on, as he was the only one who could do it. That's what Ellen believed. Then Falma said, "Someday, I think I will be able to tell everyone how to synthesize it." Launching a full-scale research facility would mean it would be possible to synthesize organic compounds and support Falma. Isn't it too valuable to spread the knowledge? There are many apothecaries that keep their new medicine recipes away from prying eyes. They then sell licenses for it for large amounts of money. It is the wisdom of our ancestors. Falma answered her naturally in a cool expression. He was a pharmacologist. Although he had become famous in his previous life for making so many new medicines, he always insisted that he would not be claiming the rights for the invention as it went against his beliefs. It should be wisdom that was to be gathered over the long history of mankind. Ellen thought it wasn't a coincidence that the medicine god dwelled within this unselfish boy. While showing up in the royal court with his father every day, Falma was entertained by Louis, 6 years old, the imperial prince. Every day, the prince would be following Falma around and admiring the person who became the savior of his mother's life. Moreover, Falma was made to play billiards with the prince. It was only appropriate for Falma to let Louis win and be delighted about it. "It's your win, Your Highness. You're really skillful, Your Highness." Louis was put in a good mood with the praise. "Yes, we'll have another game again tomorrow, Falma. So, I will take my leave for today." Falma sent off the prince to his equestrian practice. Falma was waving his hands happily. "That's not good, Falma. Why don't you ask them to take my job instead?" In the same way with Louis, Falma became friends with the 14-year-old Noah, who was the Empress page. His work included guiding and transporting the prince. He was also the prince's playmate. Since the prince was always following Falma after his work as an apothecary, there was an increased opportunity for Noah to talk to him. "Your job, His Highness had been saying that he was tired of me being his playmate, and you would enjoy a nice break too." Noah said so shamelessly. "I guess so. Playing billiards was fun too." When Falma went out to the playground, Oh, I have good news. This is just between you and me. Her Majesty is considering giving you a reward even though it's too good, even for you. She promised some kind of a position as Her Majesty's personal royal court apothecary. Damn, I'm jealous. I also want to succeed in life like you do. Noah was a young noble from a famous marquis, serving the Empress since his childhood by the order of his father. He told me he was personally taking care of the Empress and the prince. This boy maintained a behavior of full loyalty in the front of the Empress, and although he was doing a very nice job at it, he was a potty mouth and stubborn when the Empress was not around. It comes with some territory, I am just the second son. It's fine as long as it has something to do with pharmacology. Even though it was called a territory, Falma didn't really get excited about it. His face was so stupidly blank that it made his sharp expression during the time he was working as an apothecary seem like a lie. Idiot. Is there a noble that isn't interested in getting a territory? It's usually the second son who is more greedy than anybody else. I wonder why you aren't interested at all. Noah was a noble. All he ever thought about was getting a territory of his own. Falma, on the other hand, was straightforwardly thinking about pharmacology. He, however, would be very interested if it was about researching new medicines. There was nothing really particular to pay him back. This idiot giving up on something he was receiving. Still, Noah was insistently asking if Falma had anything he desired or if he had any goals in the future. Don't you ever tell anyone what I am about to tell you. This is just between you and me. Noah stepped in closer to Falma as he was gesturing to keep quiet. Noah was behaving like a good boy. I want to open a pharmacy. For the commoners. For the commoners. In spite of you being a royal court apothecary, you're a crazy, idiotic person. A noble doesn't deal with that kind of despicable business. That's a job for the commoners. Putting idiot every time he spoke seemed like Noah's favorite phrase. Him having a sharp, nasty tongue was probably a result of his life as a page to the Empress and the prince, which didn't lead to a career or chance for advancement. Since he was a noble, he frowned when the topic of running a pharmacy was brought up. He advised Falma to become a teacher at the university and a scholar like his father. Even so, isn't just a waste of time for you heal the commoners. Why, you're such an idiot. Commoners always get sick. Since they weren't blessed by the divine power, so their bodies are weak. It would be endless even if you were to use expensive medicine. Falma refuted this in his mind as he knew this was more of a consequence of bad living conditions and poor hygiene. I will be making safe medicine with lower prices. Ha ha ha, stupid idiot. How are you going to stock up on expensive raw materials? You're going to go bankrupt even if you're the son of a very rich archduke. Even your father's financial power isn't infinite. Even though Falma had the skills and knowledge about pharmacology, it turned out he was still ignorant to the ways of this world, so Noah just scoffed at him. Falma was pretending to be thinking really hard and then responded, "Oh well. I might perhaps need a little bit of territory to cultivate medicinal herbs." With Falma's substance creation ability, He wouldn't have to worry about things such as the price of raw materials, but there was a limit on creating complex compounds. Therefore he was considering developing medicines using medicinal plants and natural remedies. By the way, what kind of territory are you going to get? Seaside? Mountainside? Or a plain, which is good? It would be seaside, Falma answered without thinking anything in particular. That's good. I have certainly heard it now. Nose eye was shining sharply. After continuing the treatment for 6 months, the Empress had almost completely recovered. Falma and his father were officially invited to the palace as honored guests rather than apothecaries. There was a notice beforehand that stated for them to be fully dressed. Falma, along with his father, went towards the palace using a splendid carriage that the Empress had sent. This time Falma didn't forget and brought his wand. It was something like a get-well party, at least that was what Falma's father told him. When they arrived at the palace, the aura of the palace seemed to be different from usual. The palace was decorated with colorful rare flowers, and they were welcomed by the chamberlains in full force in the hallway. Passing through the throne hall, on the 4th floor of the widely spaced domed atrium, a golden throne was placed on the marble staircase. Numerous nobles of the empire and courtiers sat around the hall. Falma sat down beside his father and straightened himself up as they waited for an audience with the Empress. Her Majesty, the Empress, has entered the hall. The courtiers and the lords stood up while a solemn anthem played. The Empress, who was wearing a long crimson robe, entered the hall followed by her entourage. The Empress of Sanfluve Empire, Elizabeth II. Wow! So beautiful! Exclamation mark. Falma was amazed. He almost didn't recognize her. Receiving the imperial crown, she sat on the throne with the emperor's wand and glanced over the courtiers. She wasn't the patient obediently followed Falma's words, but regained the presence of a sovereign ruler. She was overflowing with dignity as the Empress. Rosy cheeks and eyes with lustrous silver hair. She was showing off a radiant beauty. She greeted all her vassals informing them that she had recovered, and the nobles stated their congratulations. Finally, the Empress received an imperial script from the head chamberlain and read it out loud. Archduke-in-Chief Royal Court Apothecary, Bruno de Medicis. Yes, Your Majesty. Bruno stood up, went up to the platform with a graceful and precise manner, and bowed in front of the Empress. Only after his father was called, had Falma noticed that the ceremony for the conferral of honors had begun. Thou, for working vigorously towards my medical treatment, as a reward, I entrust upon thee to govern the territory of Marseille. In particular, it will be used to grow and harvest the medicinal plants for the young nobleman. The Empress pointed the tip of the Emperor's wand towards Bruno, and with him grasping the tip of it signaled that the dominion of the territory was granted. It was a ceremony on conferring a fief. It was said that the territory of Marseille was a port city with prosperous trade. Rich farmland spread out along the gentle slope of the coast. It was a major producer of medicinal plants. I, as someone who is a vassal to the monarch, will faithfully serve in the name of God. I devote to thee my loyalty. In reality, even though it was under his father's name, it was good to say that the fief was given specifically to Falma. Of course Falma was watching his father's delight like it was his own. Royal Court Apothecary Apprentice Falma de Medicis. Her. Falma was so surprised he became speechless. The courtiers became noisy and was making a stir. Not only was the father had been given a fief, it seemed that the son had a reward too, and so the look of envy suddenly directed to him. Though no one who disagreed with his achievements. Thy conspicuous service was remarkable. Thou have shown me outstanding knowledge and magnificent medical skills. It was precisely thanks to thee that I still have my life now. Although Falma stood up and appeared before the Empress, he was standing upright and frozen. Warned by a courtier, Falma bowed his head while confused. I have permitted for thou to be promoted from apprentice to royal court apothecary. In addition, I will permit thou to specifically open a pharmacy in the imperial capital. Falma became frozen now. He thought that the end of the apprenticeship was decided by his father and Ellen, but Why art thou surprised? The permission for thy graduation came from thy teacher. The Empress cast a radiant smile. Falma's father had concluded Falma's apprenticeship period for royal court apothecary, and Falma would now report directly to the Empress. He was now permitted to be a full-fledged apothecary. That's what it meant. Falma suddenly made eye contact with Noah, who was respectfully attending beside the Empress. Noah seemed to be grinning and chuckling in amusement. Noah silently moved his mouth with the word, idiot. I told him to keep this between us. But I should be thankful. Falma was convinced that the reason why Noah was persistently asking him was because the Empress suggested to research the reward that would be given to him to open the first imperial-sanctioned pharmacy. It was a reward the Falma had hoped for, nothing more and nothing less. If Noah didn't leak it to the Empress, he thought he wouldn't have been granted it. Besides, perhaps, is he also to blame for why father now has the Marseille territory? Falma intuitively came to a conclusion. This probably wasn't a coincidence that this occurred after he had been casually answering Noah's question saying that he was okay with a seaside territory. The Empress held out the Emperor's wand towards Falma, who was surprised. What do I say at a time like this? Falma's head seems like it was about to burst from thinking too much. It's probably because he was too confused that he did a salute like in some historical play. I am very thankful and grateful, Your Majesty. Like with his father, Falma grasped the tip of the Emperor's wand. That was the ceremonial grant. The Emperor's wand was emitting a tinge of red light. Though as soon as Falma touched the wand, the jewel that was attached on the Emperor's wand immediately gave off a white radiance. Damn, I got careless. I should have not touched it. The Emperor's wand seems also to have a function as a divine power meter. Although the Empress' expression froze for a moment, Falma immediately released the wand and quickly went back and sat beside Bruno. The Emperor's wand was shining for only a second, so Falma was convinced that it wasn't seen clearly. Even after the party for conferral of honors, the Empress called Falma nearby, but she was acting normal, like nothing happened. He did not know if the Empress read the atmosphere, or if she just overlooked it, or if she hadn't seen anything. Many nobles had gathered around Elizabeth. He piqued the Empress' well-being. The ornate design of the royal court had unfolded. At this rate, the royal family still has much to do to achieve peace. Bruno, who only drank water, was drinking a high-class wine today, which was very rare, and ate with relish the cuisine prepared for the royal court. It looked like a huge burden was relieved from him. Dear father, your last job seemed to have finally come to an end. When Falma thanked his father for the work he'd done, his father checked the new golden badge of the royal court apothecary which Falma was wearing on his collar. It was what the Empress gave Falma. It looks great on you. Is it really okay? Falma wondered if it was okay for his father, who was his mentor, to permit him to be a true apothecary. That's what he thought, but such concerns were unfounded. There's no more I could teach you in pharmacology. This is better. Now that Falma was a full-fledged apothecary, his father was looking forward to it. His father picked up a new glass of wine and said, "Cheers." Falma, who had a glass that contains juice for children, gave a toast to his father, to Her Majesty, and the birth of a new apothecary. With the Empress' recovery, the political situation in Saint-Flour would stabilize. Falma, together with his father, felt relieved. But on that same day, Falma received a personal letter addressed to him. Who is it? A high-class sealed letter. Thou who had a huge amount of divine power, someone unparalleled since the dawn of history. Once thou have come of age and mastered thy divine arts, it will be good if thou were to apply for a duel and seek to divest me of the throne. It will not be a fair fight if thou art not yet an adult. Empress of Saint-Flour Empire, Elizabeth II. It was maybe because her health had completely recovered, the muscle-brained Empress felt motivated. I give up. The throne is safe. This is true, but I have to apologize. I am only interested in pharmacology, and you've also given me a permit to open a pharmacy, so please continue being the Empress. That was the gist of his reply. Falma indirectly responded to her by writing a letter with the highest degree of honorific language.